A great feud can, in theory, go on for as long as it bloody well wants to, because if the formula works and the stars align, then it works. I mean, look, we will all watch Stone Cold Steve Austin offer Vince McMahon a beer only to hit him with a stunner, or a devastating kick to the gut anyway, until the end of time, because their feud is evergreen, as are a few others in WWE history. The trick is to keep things fresh and know when to quit, or otherwise know when not to bring back a feud for an unwanted sequel or two. And that is because even legendary feuds between Hall of Fame superstars have their shelf lives. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 legendary WWE feuds that dragged on way too long. Join us. Number 10, John Cena vs Randy Orton. In the end, it will be cockroaches, Keith Richards, and Randy Orton and John Cena fighting over who gets to be a record 57-time WWE champion. Two of WWE's greatest developmental success stories were always going to play a major part as leaders of the next generation once the Attitude Era had thinned out, but I'm not sure anyone thought they would be squaring off as recently as 2017. Arriving on the main roster within weeks of each other in 2002, it took Big Match John and the Legend Killer 5 whole years to have their first proper singles feud. They headlined SummerSlam that year, just as they did 2 years later when WWE booked it again. In between, they feuded on the road to WrestleMania 24, including a match at No Way Out and then a triple threat also featuring Triple H at Mania itself. After 2009, they rested the feud before resurrecting it in 2013 and 2014. By then, we had seen them wrestle on practically every event under practically every stipulation, and their matches and segments only served as a stark reminder of WWE's failure to create new stars to replace them. Number 9, Triple H vs Randy Orton. Given Randy Orton and Triple H's association via Evolution and the student-mentor relationship they had both on-screen and off, there was no doubting that when the split inevitably occurred, they would be long-term rivals. It happened much quicker than most predicted, with the game betraying the Legend Killer almost immediately after young Randy won the World Heavyweight title for the first time in the summer of 2004. Hunter took the big gold belt from him a month later, and the two continued to scrap through the 2005 Royal Rumble before Batista nicked Orton's spot on the road to WrestleMania. Orton and Helmsley continued feuding as part of the DX vs Rated RKO saga, and then resumed their singles rivalry in the autumn of 2007, and then continued to mix it up through the summer of 2008, trading the WWE title as they clashed numerous times on television and pay-per-view. They collided several times more in the first half of 2009, again with the WWE title at stake, including in that bore fest of a WrestleMania main event before finally packing it in for a while. They brought it back 10 years later at Super Showdown, with Orton going over Triple H in Triple H's final televised match. Number 8, The Undertaker vs Mankind. Mick Foley deserves a ton of credit for his role in helping to make The Undertaker more interesting when he, as Mankind, made his way to WWE in the spring of 1996. The Dead Man had already established his mythical character by that point, but his feuds and subsequent matches with all manner of freaks and giants had been largely lackluster for a while. But Foley changed all that as he allowed Taker to show a lot more between the ropes than he had done previously. Their bouts throughout the year were entertaining, yes, and they managed to keep things spiced up with crazy stipulations like the Boiler Room Brawl and Buried Alive. But by the time they met over the Phenom's WWE title at Revenge of the Taker, they had been warring for a solid year off and on, and there was a definite sense that it was time to move on. Which WWE did, to be fair, though they reheated their program in 1998 for King of the Ring. Everyone remembers that Hell in a Cell match, yes, but their feud really had very little steam going into it. Number 7, Triple H vs Shawn Michaels. The feud between Triple H and Shawn Michaels was a natural one, with the Heartbreak Kid having been supplanted by his DX understudy in the 4 years that he was retired following a crippling back injury sustained in 1998. Their unsanctioned street fight at SummerSlam 2002 was a stunning epic, and had that been that for their rivalry, it would have been enough. But Michael soon realized his battered back had healed sufficiently for further matches, and in the end, a second run as a full-time in-ring performer. The matches and moments the Hunter-SHAWN feud produced were, it's fair to say, a bit of a mixed bag. Their 3 stages of hell and Hell in a Cell efforts, for example, were overblown forced epics that didn't live up to their main event billing. Their blinder on the last Raw of 2003 and Last Man Standing match at the 04 Royal Rumble, on the other hand, was simply fantastic. In the middle was, well, a lot of middling stuff. Fact is, between SummerSlam 02 and Taboo Tuesday 04, not to mention a one-off match on Raw in 06, these two spent way too much time on opposite sides of the ring. Number 6, Randy Orton vs Edge. When Randy Orton and Edge first started feuding in 2004, they were 2 hot, young and hungry prospects desperate to break through the glass ceiling. When they briefly resumed their feud in 2007, they were just about established in the main events. In 2010, they were trusted headliners who were basically in between programs and killing time before moving on to something new. And in 2020, they were veteran dads trying to navigate a friggin' global pandemic and put on the greatest wrestling match ever! Both men are great talents, and they have decent chemistry together in the ring, but WWE went to the well one too many times and revived a rivalry that people didn't exactly go nuts about to begin with. Put simply, when it comes to Edge and Orton, the best thing they've ever done together is not one of their lengthy matches, but the rated RKO tag team. The rivalry between the Viper and the Ultimate Opportunist provided some highlights, such as their IC title cracker at Vengeance 04, but it's not in the top 5 of either's career. Number 5, Seth Rollins vs Dean Ambrose. The Shield were an unstoppable force for a long time, but there was always the sense that the Hounds of Justice would, like any other stable, go their separate ways eventually. While Roman Reigns was being groomed like the big dog he is for the top spot, the most intriguing feud to come out of the Shield's dissolution was the one between Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose, at least the first time, that is. The Architect and Lunatic Fringe waged war after Rollins stabbed them in the back, with a chair, not a knife to be fair, and the two had some highly energetic outings that really helped elevate Ambrose, especially in the eyes of the fans. The highlight was probably their Hell in a Cell main event at the 2014 event of the same name. You could see why WWE would run it back in 2016 and 2018, especially with Dean playing the heel the last time, but we'd kind of seen it done to death by then, and WWE's creative wasn't especially complimentary. Number 4, D-Generation X vs the McMahons. Alright, we may be stretching the definition of legendary here, but there were 3 legends, and Shane McMahon, involved in this one. And it did take up the bulk of what felt like the best part of a decade, but as I look closer at the dates, was actually only about 6 months. I say only because half a goddamn year is more than enough time to wrap up a feud, and this one honestly felt like it was much longer. Probably because it was an offshoot of HBK's feud with Vince and Son, which began at the start of the year. And don't get me wrong, I love a good knob or poop joke as much as the next well-adjusted adult male, but the pranks and hijinks that the DX lads pulled off on a weekly basis were perhaps just a tad too much. As for the matches, they were never going to be classics, but the Hell in a Cell blow-off was shockingly brutal and ended with Vince giving Big Show a prostate checkup, even if the payoff came when the feud had already played out. Number 3, Bret Hart vs Jerry Lawler. The feud between Bret Hart and Jerry Lawler first kicked off at the 1993 King of the Ring, when Lawler jealously decked the tournament winner, and lasted all the way until the same pay-per-view 2 years later, when the Hitman made Jerry eat his own foot. Their first major match took place at SummerSlam a couple of months in, with the King enlisting the help of an evil Doink the Clown as a roadblock, before Lawler quote-unquote beat Bret after Hart refused to relinquish the sharpshooter. Their feud might have actually ended at Survivor Series a few months later, but the man from Memphis ran into some legal trouble and was taken off the show. Clearly craving a proper resolution, WWE rebooked the two of them in back-to-back pay-per-views in 1995, with the excellence of execution finally getting that elusive win and finishing things for good. There was some fun stuff in the feud, which simultaneously took place in Lawler's Memphis promotion for a time, and it was always a treat hearing the announcer make jokes at the expense of Stu and Helen, but it didn't need to be drawn out for as long as it was. Number 2, Roman Reigns vs Brock Lesnar. It takes a special type of rivalry to headline WrestleMania on 3 separate occasions. Before Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar accomplished the feat in 2022, only The Rock and Steve Austin had put on a trilogy on the grandest stage, and only 2 of those matches went on last. The Beast and Tribal Chief initially locked horns at the granddaddy of them all back in 2015, meaning there was 7 whole years between their first and last singles matches at Mania. In the interim, they fought in plenty of multi-man matches and had 4 other singles bouts, including their WrestleMania 34 chore of a main event. Aside from that, they've had 2 matches on the Saudi Arabia shows and closed the show at SummerSlam 2018. Really, their first match was their best, and everything else has since felt like a bit of a letdown at the end of the day. The Lesnar-Reigns feud showed new signs of life with the Heyman drama and emergence of Cowboy Brock in late 2021, but by the time they stood across the ring at Mania for the 3rd and hopefully final time, there was a sense that everyone would be happy if the pair of them never so much looked at each other again, let alone wrestled. Number 1, KANE versus The Undertaker. When that big red masked bastard showed up, ripped the doors off Hell in a Cell and dumped The Undertaker on his head with his own finishing move, you got the sense that the subsequent feud between the kayfabe brothers was going to be something special. And it was, in the beginning, as the two didn't meet until WrestleMania 14, a good 6 months after Kane's debut, with plenty of twists and turns thrown in along the way to keep Attitude Era fans hooked until the supernatural sibling showdown. Even the post-WrestleMania Inferno match was intriguing, due in large part to the novelty of the stipulation, but from there it was a case of diminishing returns. They reignited the feud in 2000, which was short and naff, and then again in 2003 to 2004 in order to kill off Biker Taker and bring back the Dead Man. It was also rubbish, but nowhere near as rotten as their craptacular wet fart of a feud in 2010, which saw them stink out the joint on 3 consecutive pay-per-views until Kane buried his bro. Again.